Hi everyone, I am Rebecca from ChemKnits, and today in Massachusetts it's going to be 95 degrees, so it is a perfect day to do some solar dyeing. I have 3 1-quart canning jars here that are dedicated for dye and are not used for food. And we're going to set these up 3 slightly different ways with some acid dyes to dye some yarn using the heat of the sun. This is a technique that takes patience and time, but can be a lot of fun, and especially if you have limited stove steaming access, and is perfect for a hot summer day like today. I started off by pre-soaking some Knit Picks Stroll fingering weight sock yarn. This yarn is 75% superwash merino, 25% nylon, and it's just been pre-soaked in plain tap water for 30 minutes or so. This first skein, we are going to set up a bit of a dye bath. I am going to start with a half a cup of water. Let's go ahead and add 1 tablespoon of white vinegar. It's probably a lot of vinegar, but yeah. And then I'm going to add just some of a stock solution. So this is a 1% stock solution of Jacquard Chestnut, which is really a beautiful reddish color. And I'm going to add a half cup, which is about 120 milliliters. So it should be approximately 1.2 grams of dye that we added in there. And I could add a little more water right now. Yeah, we're outside and I want to rinse this out. So let's go ahead and add another half cup of water. Okay, and now we are going to add our yarn. As I mentioned, the yarn is pre-soaked, but I did not squeeze out the excess water, which might be a mistake. And so now here, I'm going to squeeze that out. I should have squeezed it out. I don't think it's all going to fit. Actually, it might all fit. Got to be very careful here. Ooh, it really might all fit. Just barely. Oh my goodness. All right, so note to self, 1.5 cups of liquid might be a little much for doing this. And I'm gonna remove a tiny bit of liquid. Okay, so I'm curious here. The color coverage is much more even than sort of what I was thinking. I was thinking that, and maybe if I had less volume in here at the beginning, we could have gotten a lot more color at one end than the other. But we are still going to end up with a kettle dyed effect here because the yarn is jammed in and there's not a lot of room for it to move around. So I'm now going to place this lid on and set this first jar aside. For our second skein, this time I squeezed out a lot of the water and I'm going to place one end in the jar like so, and the other end is just going on my counter. And here I think we're going to play with some red and yellow today. So what I have here is some Jacquard Fire Red. There we go. I can get that tip off. And I am going to squirt some of that into the bottom. Sort of along both sides, just squirting an amount of it into the bottom. Right here I have about 1/4 cup of water and I added 1/4 teaspoon of white vinegar to that. And I am just going to pour that into the bottom. Maybe I'm going to add another 1/4 cup, sort of pouring it onto that side. And now I'm going to add in most of the yarn. So we've got some vinegar there towards the bottom. And at this stage, okay, I'm going to take another 1/4 cup of water, put in another 1/4 teaspoon of white vinegar. I'm just going to start pouring that on top. I'm going to do this one more time. So that's bringing the water level up to, oh, I guess the water's still mostly at the bottom, but you can see we've got that red at the bottom. Now I'm going to start adding, should we add one more 1/4 cup? There we go. I feel like the water level is coming up. Okay. Now let's add some of this yellow. This is the Brilliant Yellow from Jacquard. And again, it's not measured. I'm just squirting a nice, healthy amount. And now I'm going to take some water with vinegar. Again, I don't want to add too much vinegar overall. That's why I'm just doing a tiny bit at a time, adding the 1/4 cup of water. And so that last one had vinegar, this one does not. And you can see that as I'm pouring this on, we're forcing some of this yellow down. Okay, this 1/4 cup has the 1/4 teaspoon of vinegar in there. I'm going to do another one with the vinegar. And then one last 1/4 cup. And I think that we have a really good level on this one here. I could have pre-mixed my water with vinegar to get it more even, but I'm curious what this is going to do, and I don't want to shift it too much, but you can see we have a really lovely sort of tableau going on. For this last one, I am going to respirator up. First, I'm going to place one end of our yarn into the container. This time I am wearing my respirator because we're going to add some powder to here. Okay, so I think I'm going to start with the purple on the bottom. I'm just taking a tiny bit of powder and sort of tapping it onto the yarn. I'm going to take a tiny bit more. Sort of tap it in onto the other side. I don't want to add like clumps of the powder because those just won't dissolve. And it's possible some of this won't dissolve either. Let's put a bunch of yarn in. And now we're going to do this with the sapphire glitter and a new clean spoon. I am wearing a respirator and safety glasses. And I'm trying not to touch the yarn with the spoon if I'm going to add the spoon back in to the container. Okay, and now before I put that last bit in, the last color is deep magenta. You guys, it is so humid out here right now. Oh man. Okay, take just a little bit. Sort of adding it around. Oh, there's definitely a clump there, but is what it is. Add a tiny bit more to that top. Close up the dye before too much humidity gets in. Okay. And now we can start adding some water. Let's start with just a 1/4 cup of water along the top. I will add vinegar in a bit, but we're just going to start adding some water. And I did squeeze this one out. Okay, there we go. I'm reusing a lot of the water from my Presoak today. So I just added 1 tablespoon of white vinegar into this cup. And this is the first introduction of acid today. Slowly adding more and more water, and you can see that we're getting some colors to spread. I think I might go ahead and add one more tablespoon of the white vinegar. Okay. Yep, and now I'm going to fill this up with water. Let the water soak down. And it looks like I need maybe a little bit more. Whew, it is humid out here. Okay, there we go. That is pretty good. Please excuse the mess that is around my shed. But now I'm placing these 3 jars in some direct hot sunlight. I will be moving them over the course of the day so that way they will stay in the sunlight. I don't know if I'm going to be filming any of the check-ins, but they look awesome. And unfortunately, to give you a nice view of this, it's really cool looking. I have to block the sun a little bit, but I think that we have a possibility to get something that looks really, really, really cool. About an hour in, everything is feeling nice and warm, which is good, good, good. Maybe some of these colors have spread out a bit. Ooh, that is, yeah, I'd say that those pinks have definitely spread out some. That is really pretty. And here, this one's looking pretty much the same. I'm curious how much they will blend. I like what I'm seeing in here. It looks like we might get some really, really pretty variegated tonal effects with this one. But anyway, I will keep an eye on the sun to make sure we stay in the sunshine. It's been about 4 hours and things are nice and hot. If I go and touch the lids, I can definitely feel that heat. It looks to me like our powder has spread out some. I don't know if it's more from the beginning, but there's definitely been some spread. And here with our red and yellow, I'm not necessarily seeing much blending of those colors. But we will go ahead and make sure that these stay in the sunlight as the shade creeps onto the patio. I'll move them out into the yard to make sure we can get as much heat as we can over the course of the day. These jars stayed outside in the hot, hot sun for 11 hours. When I finally brought them inside, they were definitely warm to touch. And there was no question that the yarn had been heated for a very long time. It is now the next morning and I am ready to open up the jars. Could I have opened these up last night as soon as I brought them in? Absolutely. I don't think that waiting overnight was anything that added anything at all, but sometimes timing is what it is. Let's start with our semi-solid. You kind of see through the glass that there are some bits of beautiful tonal variation, and ooh, look at those white spots. And there's no question that all of the color went into our yarn. What is left in the jar is completely clear. Wow, this is cool. I think that I expected there to be tonal variation, but I didn't expect there to be some white left. This is beautiful. And who would have thought that chestnut makes such a wonderful purple? From this first rinse bath, we can see that there is nothing coming off the yarn. That color, it has bound, and we had, I think, equivalent to 1.2 grams of dye here. So that's not a tiny amount of dye. I'm now adding just a little bit of some plain dish soap. So we can do another bleeding check. Of the 3 jars that we set up, this is the only one where I actually measured the amount of dye going in, so we know how much dye was in here, and I am thrilled. I am absolutely thrilled with how this has come out, and there is no bleeding. I'm now going to wash the soap out of this yarn, set it in the spin dryer, and we will open up the next jar. In the second jar, we added some liquid of the goodness, maybe it was Jacquard Fire Red and Jacquard Bright Yellow into this jar, and then we filled it up with some water. It doesn't look like, at least from the outside, that a lot of the colors mixed together, but we will see. Ooh, when we pull this out, and yeah, it looks like we've got red and yellow and white with a few patches of red that made it up to the white, but also all that color is in the yarn. There was no pigment left in that jar. I should point out there's a tiny bit of yellow that has gotten on my hand, and I'm not sure if it's from, I don't think it's from the yarn, it could be from the jar though, which is just something to keep in mind. It could have been from the lid or something. The colors really didn't blend very much, but I only added them to the very bottom and the very top. I mean, clearly they moved some, and this is very, very pretty. I like some of these like little dollops of red and the white that goes through. But again, with the exception of that little bit that went onto my hand, our color is in the yarn. Once again, I am going to wash with a little bit of dish soap. Sometimes this is a point where the addition of soap where you can see some color bleeding, but I am very, and we got some bleeding. I was just going to say I am very confident that all the color is in the yarn, but this is why I show the wash steps. That way you guys can all see what is going to happen. And this is also a reason why I picked a red for this project. Red dyes often need a little more acid, maybe a little more heat and a little more time. So what I'm going to do now, I have no idea how much acid I had added into the container at the beginning, but I'm just going to add a nice healthy splash of white vinegar to our rinse bath. And hopefully, and you can see that that did stop that bleeding. So maybe there was a little bit that came out with the soap. We'll try the soap again in a little bit. But, yeah, sometimes adding a little vinegar when you start to see bleeding is the way to go. So I'm going to go ahead and wait, I think, 10 minutes, and then we'll come back and try washing this some more. Okay, I am removing the yarn from the vinegar pre-soak, which looks completely clear, and I don't see any of the pink bleeding onto our yellow. Here we've got, this is the plain tap water. Let's add some soap into here. Fair amount of dish soap. Wahoo! I'm going to wash this a few more times just to make sure that we don't see any additional bleeding. But, yeah, then we'll go put everything through the spin dryer and come back once everything is dry. The third jar is the one I am most excited to open. This jar is where we added some powder, some dry powder of our Jacquard acid dyes, and then we filled it up with liquid. So even though we saw bleeding in the last one, my hypothesis is that if we are going to see bleeding, we might see it here, because it's possible not all that dye dissolved. But ooh, oh, this is awesome. This is so awesome. This turned out absolutely, absolutely incredible. The dyes spread out in a beautiful, beautiful way. And random, a beautiful random way. There is white left behind, but there's also wonderful, wonderful coverage over the whole thing. And right off the bat, we're not seeing any color bleeding. That doesn't mean that we won't see color bleeding. It just means right now we're not seeing color bleeding. I'm now going to add some of our clear dish soap. This is the step where if we're going to see bleeding, we might as I'm washing it, I'm keeping a hand on it. So as I'm moving things around, and we can add even a little more soap just for our bleed test. So yeah, that's looking great. I am not seeing this hot fuchsia, or no, what was it? Berry Crush? I don't remember what color it was. I'll check back. But I'm not seeing it bleed, which is great. So I'm going to finish rinsing this out, and then, yeah, this will go through the spin dryer with the others. In this video, we combined dye with yarn 3 different ways to create some beautiful sun-dyed colorways. We used just liquid dye that we mixed and then added the yarn to it. We added the yarn and then squirted some liquid dye in various sections. And then we used dry powder and tapped powder around and then added water at the end to let those dyes spread out. I think of the 3, my favorite would be the one we did with the dry powder. It was really fun to pretty randomly place the colors and then pour the water on top and watch these colors spread out. I think that we benefited here also because there wasn't as much acid in the yarn initially, so the colors didn't start striking as fast. And in this case, maybe the colors struck a little faster because there was enough resist that they did not spread all the way through that center of the yarn. I love how this almost feels glazed in places. I think I was hoping for some kind of dip-dyed feel, but I had a little too much liquid in there initially. So maybe next time I should add the wet yarn in with no additional liquid and then pour the dye on top and let that dye mixture be what soaks all the way through. Some color might strike towards the top and less towards the bottom, and I think that would be a really fun variation. For all this color is random, there's a balance to it, and we've got speckles, and it came out great. There's still a lot of white behind, but the color struck so well, and I absolutely love how it turned out. This yarn is really pretty, and I think it would give some micro stripe type feel when you knit with it. So I think that you could create a phenomenal yarn with this. I was hoping the colors might spread out a little bit more. I'll be honest, but that's one of the reasons why I wanted to play around with this. I wanted to see and there's more variations I could do, but I wanted to see which one was my favorite. So that way I could expand on that more and try to perfect it in the future. I am Rebecca from ChemKnits, and I really hope that you enjoyed this solar dyeing experiment. I've never tried this with acid dyes before, and I have to say, I'm really impressed with how well these colors struck without needing to add additional heat. Yeah, we were outside all day, but you could set up tons of colors this way. And honestly, this is a great kind of project that you could do with a group. Yes, you would need to let them sit for a while, but people could dye the yarn, take their jars home, and leave it outside before washing it. So it's just a fun way that you can do things without needing access to a kitchen to have a little dye along or dye party. Please subscribe, like, turn on notifications, and let me know in the comments what kind of variations I should try with solar dyeing in the future. By the time this video comes out, a lot of the summer heat might be gone, but I'm always thinking ahead to next summer. So yeah, let me know how you would build on these techniques. If you're already a huge fan of ChemKnits, or you're a new huge fan of ChemKnits and want to support us on another level, check out the ChemKnits Patreon. I offer some really cool perks for patrons, such as behind-the-scenes sneak peeks, early access to new content, and more, and you should really go check it out. You can find links in the video description and iCard. Thank you so much for watching, everyone.